In 1950, a man sat down and wrote a question that would haunt the next 70 years of human civilization. The question was simple, 11 words, and it changed everything that came after. Can machines think? The man who wrote it was not a philosopher. He was not a science fiction writer. He was a mathematician working in a small office in Manchester, England, a man whose name most people alive today do not know, whose face has never appeared on a banknote, whose story was hidden from the world for decades by the government he served and the society he lived in. His name was Alan Turing, and what he saw in 1950, what he described with the precision of a mathematician and the imagination of a prophet, was not just the future of computing, it was the future of everything. But before we get to 1950, we need to go to the North Atlantic, November 1942. A British naval convoy carrying fuel and ammunition was crossing some of the most dangerous waters on Earth. German U-boats had been tracking it for 3 days. The submarines were in position. The convoy was in range. They never arrived. The convoy's route had been changed 12 hours earlier based on intelligence decoded at a secret facility in the English countryside, based on work done by a mathematician that the sailors on that convoy would never know existed. One of those sailors was a 22-year-old named Thomas from Liverpool. He had been on sea for 11 months. He had a photograph of his mother in his breast pocket. He was supposed to be home by Christmas. He came home. He married. He had children. His grandchildren are alive today. He never knew why. This is the story of the man who saved Thomas and who predicted the world his grandchildren would live in, and what the world did to him in return. Alan Matheson Turing was born on June 23, 1912, in London, England. From his earliest years, the people around him recognized something unusual, not just intelligence, but a particular kind of mind that processed the world differently from everyone else. At age 9, Turing taught himself to read in 3 weeks. At Sherborne School, he solved advanced problems his teachers had not yet covered, not because he had read ahead, but because he had reasoned his way there independently. His headmaster called him a problem. His mathematics teacher called him inevitable. Both were right. At Cambridge University, where he arrived in 1931, Turing encountered the deepest questions in mathematics, questions about what could and could not be proven, what could and could not be computed, what the fundamental limits of logical reasoning actually were. These were not practical questions. They were philosophical questions dressed in mathematical clothing. And Turing attacked them with a tool that had never existed before. In 1936, at the age of 25, Alan Turing published a paper that most people have never read, whose consequences surround every person alive today. The title is almost deliberately intimidating. On computable numbers with an application to the Entscheidungsproblem. The Entscheidungsproblem, the decision problem, was mathematics asking itself the darkest possible question. Are there things that cannot be known? Problems that no logical system, no matter how powerful, can ever solve? Turing answered yes, and in answering, he accidentally described the computer. In the paper, Turing described a theoretical device, what would later be called a Turing machine, that could simulate the logic of any computation by following a set of rules applied to symbols on an infinite tape. This was not a blueprint for a physical device, it was a mathematical proof. But embedded inside that proof was something extraordinary, the theoretical foundation for every computer ever built. The laptop, the smartphone, the server farms running the artificial intelligence systems of 2025,
All of them are, in the most precise mathematical sense, physical implementations of the idea Alan Turing described in 1936 when he was 25 years old. But the world would not learn what Turing could do until the world needed him desperately. In September 1939, Britain declared war on Nazi Germany. The German military was using an encryption machine called Enigma to encode its communications, naval orders, troop movements, strategic plans. British intelligence knew Enigma existed. They did not know how to break it. The mathematical complexity of the encryption system was, by any conventional measure, unbreakable. Turing was recruited to a secret facility called Bletchley Park in the English countryside. What happened inside Bletchley Park between 1939 and 1945 was hidden from the world for decades under the British Official Secrets Act. What is now known is this: Turing led the mathematical effort to break Enigma, designing an electromechanical device called the bomb that could systematically test thousands of possible Enigma configurations per day. The bomb worked. The Enigma code was broken, and the intelligence gathered from decoded German communications, codenamed Ultra, is now believed by historians to have shortened the Second World War by at least 2 years. Conservative estimates suggest this saved somewhere between 14 and 21 million lives. It saved Thomas from Liverpool. It saved millions of others whose names we will never know. Alan Turing, working in secret in a country house in Buckinghamshire, may have saved more human lives than any single military commander of the 20th century, and almost nobody knew. After the war, Turing returned to academic life with a mind that had been tested in the most consequential possible way and had not been found wanting. He began thinking about the next question, not what machines could calculate, but what machines could do, whether the gap between human thought and machine logic was a gap of kind or merely a gap of degree. In 1950, he published the paper that would define the next 70 years of technological ambition. It was called Computing Machinery and Intelligence. It opened with those 11 words: "I propose to consider the question, can machines think?" And what followed was not science fiction, it was not speculation, it was a rigorous, precise, methodical examination of what machine intelligence would require, what it would look like, how it would be tested, and what objections stood in the way of accepting it as real. Turing proposed what he called the imitation game, later known as the Turing test. A human interrogator would conduct a text conversation with 2 entities, one human, one machine. If the interrogator could not reliably distinguish between them, the machine could be said to think. The elegance of this proposal was not just philosophical, it was practical. Turing was not asking whether machines were conscious, whether they had souls, whether they experienced the world. He was asking a question that could be tested, a question that moved the debate from philosophy into engineering. And in doing so, he set the agenda for artificial intelligence research for the next 70 years. But Turing went further than the imitation game. In the same paper, he made predictions that were so specific and so accurate that reading them today produces a feeling that is difficult to name, something between admiration and unease. He predicted that by the end of the 20th century, it would be possible for a machine to play the imitation game well enough to fool an average interrogator more than 30% of the time after 5 minutes of conversation. He was approximately correct. He predicted that the objection most people would raise against machine intelligence, that machines merely do what they are programmed to do and therefore cannot truly think, was philosophically incoherent. He argued that humans also do what their biology and experience have programmed them to do. The distinction between programming and thought, he suggested, was less clear than it appeared. He predicted the emergence of machine learning, the idea that rather than trying to program all knowledge into a machine, it would be more productive to give the machine the ability to learn from experience. He called this explicitly. He described it in terms remarkably close to what modern machine learning actually became. And he predicted something darker. He predicted that the question of whether machines could think would eventually become not a technical question, but a social and political one. That as machines became more capable, the pressure to deny their intelligence would come not from scientific evidence, but from human discomfort with the implications. He was right about this, too. In 1952, Alan Turing's life was destroyed by society he had helped to save. He was arrested for gross indecency under a British law that criminalized homosexuality. He was prosecuted and convicted. Given the choice between imprisonment and chemical castration through a course of synthetic estrogen injections, Turing chose the injections. The man who broke Enigma, the man who wrote the theoretical foundation of modern computing, the man who predicted artificial intelligence with the precision of a prophet, that man was subjected to a program of chemical castration by the British government because of who he loved. In June 1954, Alan Turing's body was found in his home in Wilmslow, England. He was 41 years old. A half-eaten apple was found beside his body. The coroner ruled his death a suicide by cyanide poisoning. His mother Sarah spent the rest of her life insisting her son had not chosen to die, that he was not the kind of man who gave up, that the cyanide had been an accident, a careless experiment, a contaminated apple in a room where he worked. She may have been right. She may have needed to be right. No one ever investigated seriously enough to tell her which one it was. The half-eaten apple beside his body has never been officially explained. Decades later, a technology company founded in a California garage would choose a bitten apple as its logo. Apple Inc. has always denied the connection to Turing, but the people who knew Steve Jobs best have never been entirely sure he was telling the truth about that, and neither has anyone else. Whether Turing intended to die, whether the apple was deliberate, coincidental, or something else entirely, has never been definitively established. What is not in dispute is that Alan Turing spent his final 2 years of his life prosecuted, chemically altered, stripped of his security clearance, and cut off from the classified work that had given his extraordinary mind its greatest purpose. The world he had predicted was beginning to build itself around him, and he was not permitted to see it. For decades after his death, Turing's wartime work remained classified. His contribution to breaking Enigma was not publicly acknowledged. His 1950 paper circulated among specialists, but was not widely understood by the public. The rehabilitation came slowly, and it came late. In 2009, 54 years after his death, the British Prime Minister issued a formal apology. He called what was done to Turing appalling and utterly unfair. In 2013, Queen Elizabeth II granted Alan Turing a royal pardon for being who he was. The man who shortened World War II by 2 years, the man who described artificial intelligence before the first computer existed, the man who built the mathematical foundation of the modern world. That man needed a pardon. Think about what that means. In 2021, Turing's face was placed on the British £50 note, the highest denomination in circulation. The image shows him at his desk with his 1936 paper visible beside him. It is in every sense too late, but it is something. Thomas from Liverpool died in 1987. He was 67 years old. He had 4 children and 11 grandchildren. He never knew about Bletchley Park. He never knew about Alan Turing. He never knew that a mathematician in a country house in Buckinghamshire had read the enemy's mail and moved his convoy out of the path of the submarines that were hunting it. His grandchildren are using artificial intelligence right now, technology built on foundations his grandfather's savior described in 1950. None of them know his name either. Today, in 2025, the artificial intelligence systems Turing predicted are generating text, images, music, and code at a scale and sophistication that would have been called science fiction as recently as 10 years ago. Large language models engage in conversations that pass versions of the Turing test not 30% of the time, but reliably, consistently, in ways that even their creators sometimes find difficult to categorize. The questions Turing asked in 1950 about machine thought, about the nature of intelligence, about where the line between human and artificial cognition actually lies, are no longer theoretical. They are the defining questions of the present moment. They are being asked in corporate boardrooms, in government hearings, in philosophy departments, in courtrooms, and in ordinary households by people who have never heard of Alan Turing, but are living inside the world his imagination built. The imitation game is no longer a thought experiment. It is running, right now, on servers around the world, in conversations happening at this exact moment between humans and machines that Turing described with mathematical precision 75 years ago. Alan Turing asked his question in 1950 from a small office in Manchester, knowing he would not live to see the answer arrive. He was right about the machines. He was right about the intelligence. He was right about our discomfort with both. The question he asked is still the only question that matters. We just have better machines to avoid answering it with.